أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم جنات عدن يدخلونها ومن صلح من آبائهم وأزواجهم وذرياتهم والملائكة يدخلون عليهم من كل باب سلام عليكم بما صبرتم فنعم عقبى الدار. Our children, we are here to talk about this topic because, as you all know, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis Ayyadullahu Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz gave that specific mandate to Majlis Ansarullah USA. The verse of Surah Tahrim, you all remember, save yourself and your families from a fire. Following in those footsteps, last year we specifically talked about the theme of becoming the men of God. Because that's what the first part of the verse says, save yourself. First you take care of yourself. And that's why we believe this year we are moving on to saving our families or our children. In other words, raising children in today's America, like Hazrat Masih Maud salatu wassalam says in that poem, is like growing roses in a desert. Really think about it. It's a very harsh environment. We are all optimists, but we cannot forget the environment we are in, where if you're born after 1981, those are the statistics in America. If you're born out after 1981, there's a 1 in 3 chance, 36% chance that you're an atheist. Staggering numbers. And if you look at that trajectory, that number is only increasing. So that's the generation of our children, born after 1981. For us to somehow remain oblivious that it's not going to happen to us, it's a very classical thing that we physicians see all the time, that, you know what, lung cancer, not going to happen to me, it's going to happen to somebody else. So that is the desert that I talk of. This is the desert where we are trying to grow roses. What else are we trying to do? You're right, the righteous progeny, like Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam did. However, in a very humble way, take it from a brother, I see the faces in this room and I can tell you I've spent more time with your children than many of you. In the past 20 years, according to my service or my opportunity in Jamaat, many of you sitting here, your children share more of their secrets with me as their brother than you do. I say that because I want you to know that I'm about to make a humble statement. Our children are better than us. As fathers, I want you to know that. I want you to report that to you as someone who is a soldier in the trenches for 20 years. Our children are better than most of us when we were 16, 20, 25 years old, based on the opportunity available to us and based on the opportunity available to them. Deep down, you know in your own heart. So we are going to start there. What that means they're tough. They're able to sustain in this society. So when I was thinking about growing roses in a desert, it's amazing. There is a desert rose society in America. There's a society for everything. They tell you, how do you grow roses in a desert? And there are 2 very important steps. One is you first select the tough roses. And 2, you water them 3 or 4 times. You water them more. That's the basic formula. In this ijtema, you're going to hear a lot about our children. You will hear about modifiable factors. What do I mean by that? As males, we have a high incidence of heart disease. Men have more heart attack than women. Now, if you smoke, you increase your risk further. But you can give up smoking. That's a modifiable risk factor. You can give up smoking, reduce your risk. But you cannot change your DNA. You cannot change your sex. So being male is a non-modifiable factor. You should not spend time worrying about that. Now you're born with that DNA. You spend your focus on modifiable risk factors. In this ijtema, you're going to walk away by learning those behaviors, those modifiable risk factors. And I'm going to very humbly present to you 3 today. The story of Hazrat Ibrahim, beautifully, Mehdi Sahib said it, the opening verses, if you really look at that story, Ibrahim had to, he's seeking this progeny of prophets, he's seeking Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But what is he doing? He's leaving his son and his wife in the desert. You're going to hear a lot about spending time with children. That's very important. But we don't want to spend bad time with our children. That's step number 1. For the sake of Allah, you will have to leave these flowers in the desert. If you don't, that's the wrong message to send. If there is a game going on and you're watching with your family and you say there's salat time, you say, no, let me spend time with my children, that was the time to leave Ibrahim in the desert. Even if your son does not want to get up, you get up and go do your salat. If there is an Ansar Ijtema today, and you for no reason are sitting home and your son knows about that, it's a wrong message to send. It was important to leave them in that desert for this weekend. It was important to deprive them of this company sometimes for the sake of Allah, so they always will remember the priority. This is something you cannot drill in a child with speeches. I have Moiz and Moeen sitting here, right? With your father, Munir. Your father, at times he told me that at times if I had to go to itikaf, I'd leave them home even if they're crying. The father is willing to leave them in the desert. That's the message. Number 1. Because it's counterintuitive. We feel like, and it's very important to spend time with children, but select the right time zone. Spending time with children when there is a Jalsa Salana going on and we are saying this is a soccer game today, let me just go with you to the soccer game, bad idea. That was a day to leave them in the desert because you are trying to grow flowers. You're trying to grow roses in the desert. Step number 2. What happened when Ibrahim ﷺ left his son and wife in the desert? Allah started a stream for them. Allah brought a Zamzam. Allah brought water, the source of life to them. It was Zamzam that brought caravans. It was Zamzam that turned that desert into Mecca. It was that water, right? We talk of Khilafat. The Nizam-e-Khilafat, the institution, the office holders, the family of Khilafat, is that Zamzam in this desert for your children. And what do we do sometimes? We poison that water. What do I mean by that? You already know. If I'm unhappy with you, I go and tell my wife. I go and tell my son. I've poisoned the water. This is the water Allah had given me, this source of water for my children in this society, so I could grow roses. Allah has given us this Jamaat. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Awwal says, Khilafat Kaisari ki dukaan ka soda water nahi hai. This Khilafat means something. He says, this is not like soda that you can buy from a corner shop. So my dear brothers, yes, is life perfect? No. Are some of your grievances with system of Jamaat genuine? They may be. I'm not invalidating your feelings. But isn't that where we have to be wasta'inu bis sabri was salah? What else is the meaning of sabr? If I'm not saying that you're not suffering, I'm not saying that your grievances are all wrong. All I'm saying is don't poison Zamzam. Don't poison the minds of your children. And we sometimes do that unknowingly. But it's a huge conflict for a 16, 12, 14-year-old to hear that, internalize it, and then find out 8 years later that the father wants him or her to marry in the same polluted water. Why would you do that? So every one of us here is thinking, I haven't done it. There's a litmus test. The litmus test is, think in your own mind, if you don't like someone in your family, are your children friends with their children? If they are, then you haven't polluted the water. But if your grievance has seeped into your children, then whether you know or not, the water is poisonous. The children have picked on your signals. So you have to think in your own mind. We're not supposed to be friends with everyone, but still, you're supposed to remain neutral, brotherly. You're supposed to have that فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. So I have to do that soul searching. Think of the people in your own Jamaat, our wives, our children. If they're not meeting each other, if that guy's son is the qaid and your son is not helping him, then Zamzam is polluted. So step number 2, no matter what happens, and things will happen, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Please, I humbly say to you, we create a huge conflict for our children when we poison that water. That rose cannot survive in the desert then. There are already so many external pressures that our children are facing. We all know that. There's no point talking about dating and gaming and and alcohol and drugs and girls, because you can't change that, trust me. This is a very easy thing to change, the 2 steps that we've talked so far. Send the right signal by leaving them in the desert. And number 2, when they are in the desert, don't pollute the water. Number 3, it's not enough. When you have to grow roses in the desert, you water them excessively. So just not saying negative things is not enough. You actually tell them positive things. And there are a lot of positive things in this Jamaat. You don't have to exaggerate. You don't have to lie. A brother met me earlier today, traveled probably 1,000 miles away. I could visibly see his jaw swollen. Visibly, I touched it. It was tender. I could clearly see as an infection specialist that he has a bad gum infection. I said, what's this? And he said, you know what, at the end, I didn't go to the doctor, but I just could not skip the Ijtema. I have to go and tell that story to my son now, that I met someone like this. What am I doing? I'm increasing the water to that rose. I'm watering that rose. I'm going to pick on these stories. All of us we have angels around here. We're going to pick on those good things among us. I'm going to go and tell them the story of you two who are here from Miami, that these 2 young boys were there, and maybe you're in Baltimore. You should also come. So the 3rd step is just not doing backbiting is not enough. There is so much beauty in this Jamaat, in the people around you, that you have to share that beauty with your children. Serendipitously, randomly, find good things. As they say, catch your brothers doing good things, not catch them doing bad things. Rasulullah ﷺ said, the worst of the people are those engaged in slandering others, those who ruin relationships between dear ones and who try to find faults with innocent people. Think about that. It's a self-destructive behavior. It does not do any harm to the Jamaat. It harms our own orchard. It harms our own garden. Our flowers don't bloom. So those are the 3 steps. I want you to once again know, by the grace of Allah, your children, in many, many, many cases, are better than how we were at our age, based on the opportunity they have. They're going to make a garden here. We're not talking 2 or 3 random flowers. We're not talking just a bunch of roses. We're talking changing this desert into a garden. That's why Ahmadiyyat came to USA. Khulafa have said this. A mother came to Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi in 80s, and she was crying. She said, Hazur, allow us to go back to Pakistan. This is a bad society. We will get crushed here. We will lose our generations. And Hazur said, if you are going to walk through a jungle full of thorns, yes, you will have some scratches, but you shall prevail. We did not come here to run away. We came here because the desert needed us. We came here to change this desert and remove the cacti and plant flowers here. Let it bloom with the roses of your progeny and their progeny, inshallah ta'ala. But it takes time. Hazrat Ibrahim ﷺ's prayer took thousands of years. We may not see the bloom. We're okay with that. Some of us will, some of us won't. That does not mean that we should give up on the course. A smart man knows that. A lot of people worked on putting the first man on moon. A lot of them died before that happened. But we did put the first man on moon. So similarly, Allah's promise will come true. No question about that. These roses will bloom. And they actually will do things that you desire in your hearts. That inshallah ta'ala, as fathers, we all have certain desires that we were unable to fulfill. Inshallah, Allah ta'ala will give them the life. They will do those good things. Don't give up on a child. Hazrat Masih Maud talks about tarbiyat-e-awlad, raising good children. And he says, I consider this a form of shirk, to continue to interrupt our children on every little thing, because it sends the message as if we are in control. And Hazur in the end says, Jaisa kisi mein saadat ka tukhm hoga, waqt par sab sabz ho jayega. If there is a DNA of righteousness in someone, at its own time, it's going to bloom. The rose will come. So as fathers, I know some of us get annoyed. The son said, I don't care. It rubs the father the wrong way. The son said something, and the father didn't, the father said something, so the son didn't listen. Certain things just happen with time. Ask yourself. There's a famous quotation, they say, every 16-year-old thinks that his father is an idiot. They say every 16-year-old thinks that his father is an idiot until he becomes a father himself. But by that time, he has a 16-year-old who thinks he's an idiot. So there are certain laws of nature. It's a cycle of life. Certain flowers will bloom at their own time. So I want to recite to you the translation of the verse I recited in the beginning. Focus on modifiable risk factors. That's what this Ijtema is about. Giving you practical advice, things that are in your control. The 3 things today. Number 1, give precedence to your faith over your worldly affairs and let your children see that. Leave them in the desert if you have to for the sake of Allah. When you spend that time with them, that's poisonous time. You're sending a wrong message, number 1. Number 2, when you're with them at home, you have a grievance with someone, don't pollute your zamzam. Don't talk to even your wife, unless you give me some evidence from Islam that backbiting with wife is acceptable. I'm happy to change that position. Even our wives, they want to see that moral authority in the man. That is how you gain that moral authority. Pray, melt your heart in front of Allah. And number 3, tell them good things. Find those good things. Tell your children, our Jamaat gives over $100,000 to students who cannot afford their studies. Our Jamaat offers over $30,000 last I checked, just for African American scholarships. There are people who speak 10 different languages right here. I've already met someone who speaks Spanish, someone who speaks Nigerian, Arabic. Tell them these things. Where else you find such a diverse group of Muslim elders, not youth, elders in America. Water these roses. And what will happen then? When you water the roses, they will bloom. Allah says in Surah Al-Ra'd, and I'll close with that. See, we're worried about the desert. Allah says there's a garden. Gardens of eternity. They shall enter them, and also those who are righteous from among their fathers, and their wives, and their children. And angels shall enter unto them from every gate, saying, Peace be unto you, because you were steadfast. Behold, how excellent is the reward of the final abode. My dear brothers, don't give up on these children. We are here to work on those modifiable risk factors. May Allah Ta'ala bless the Ismails and Hajaras that you've left behind. May Allah Ta'ala accept all your prayers during this Ijtema, your travelers, your fathers. Your heart is in anguish. A very dear brother of mine once said, this is my trick of prayers. We need to share these tricks with each other. How do we go and beg Allah? Everybody has their own trick. He said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that 3 people's prayer is accepted. If you're a traveler, your prayer is accepted. If you're a father, your prayer is accepted for your children. And if your heart is in anguish, your prayer is accepted. He says, whenever my heart is in anguish, I get in a car and I travel. It's, you can take it or leave it. I know, as they say, it's a Zoki thing. He says, if my heart is really bruised, I get in the car and I become a traveler. And I pray during that travel. I found that awesome. Allah has made you a traveler here at this Ijtema. You are a father, many of you. Think of something that is an anguish in your heart. Melt your heart in front of Allah Ta'ala and get your roses before you leave. Jazakumullah for your attention.